Now, there's a price to pay for everything. Sometimes the price is big, sometimes it's small. There was a price to pay for maintaining the middle-class way of life in early Chicago. Many blacks were willing to pay it, others were not. Continuing from the 1945 book Black Metropolis by Dr. St. Clair Drake and Horace Caton. Service. The whole atmosphere of middle-class life is one of tension, particularly at upper middle-class level or among people on the way up, but not yet secure in their position. Why so much tension? Pay attention and find out. The drive to get ahead, to lay a little something by, to prepare for the education of children, and at the same time to keep up front by wearing the right kind of clothes, having a nice home, and belonging to the proper organizations. The pursuit of these goals brings into being definite social types, which Bronzeville calls strivers and strainers. The tension was created by contrasting interests, wanting to save versus wanting to look the part in front of the public. The strivers were able to save and prepare for their children's future, and at the same time, balance the middle-class look. But the strainers spent above their means in their attempt to present the middle-class front. With limited incomes, the problem of striking a balance between the conspicuous consumption necessary to maintain status and long-range goals like buying property and educating children becomes a difficult one. Why was it difficult? Because the middle-class world, like any other society, acts like a pressure chamber. It seeks to create members that mold to its frequency. And part of the black middle-class world was to present as if they had it. And to present otherwise was to be out of tune with that frequency. And that friction could be felt. That's why it was a challenge to balance saving with conspicuous consumption. During the Depression years particularly, Bronzeville's middle-class families faced a continuous crisis. Sometimes the family units break under the strain, particularly if one of the partners is oriented toward excessive conspicuous consumption. They had to be careful here, because one partner might catch the heebie-jeebies and start spending all the money, like it's their last day on earth. The testimony of the husband quoted below may be a rationalization in his individual case, but it does indicate a type of domestic tragedy that occurred often enough in upper middle-class circles to excite widespread comment.
One reason my wife and I couldn't make it was that she wanted to spend everything on good times and clothes.
Uh-oh, she's on fire like NBA Jam. Hands were hot as she passed the money like a hot potato. As soon as the money entered the purse, it had minimal time to rest, because soon after it was going into other hands as she went shopping downtown at the Loop. This man here got tired of it, and he claimed that that was the reason they couldn't make it. Now, maybe her side was a bit different, but that's his reasoning.
I wanted to have something someday. My wife makes good money as a school teacher, but she spends more than she makes all the time. Just about the time she gets out of debt, she's back in again, in a big way. Our paths are just two different ones. We'll never be able to make it.
And this is unfortunate here, but it happens. This is why I say sometimes you can't change people's minds. When people are set in their ways and they have overpowering habits, then there's pretty much nothing you can do. But what he's describing here is a person stuck in a cycle, going round and round on the Ferris wheel. He didn't want to get on that ride, and neither did she want to get off of it. And that caused a major problem for them, just like it would for anyone else.
We've agreed to disagree, and my mother's here taking care of the child. I'm trying to raise my daughter to be a real, substantial person. I try to talk to her about her future. My mother treats her just like she's her own child. I want to give her all the advantages and opportunities I'd have had if I hadn't married so soon.
The last comment is very general in middle-class circles.
I would have been farther ahead if I hadn't married so soon.
And this attitude further weakens the stability of the family. How? because a person starts to see their spouse as a hindrance to their progress. That's a breeding ground for resentment and fights that seem to occur out of nowhere. That's why that mindset weakens the stability of the family. But the need to maintain front and the concern for children are a counterweight to separation, which does not operate generally at the lower class level. Most of the lower class could care less about putting on any fancy front in front of anyone in public. But the middle class did. And because of that, many of them were willing to ride it out, although they were sick and tired of each other. This is why divorce statistics only tell a small part of the story. It only measures how well couples are at staying together. But it says nothing about the content of the marriage. I've seen a lot of couples who I could tell were absolutely tired of each other, but they've been married for decades. And this is true across different groups of people. The relative stability of the middle-class family is partly a function of long-time goals and of the desire to be respectable, even if it means sacrificing personal happiness, which middle-class blacks weren't the only ones to do this, so let's be clear. It was an embarrassing thing across many middle-class American cultures. White Americans shamed divorces back then. So most certainly, a lot of them remained stuck in dysfunctional marriages too. Middle-class black Americans were essentially mirroring white American norms, which created the same circumstances. Then when the 60s and 70s came, white cultural norms around marriages loosened, and blacks essentially followed along. But back in the 30s and 40s, maintaining a marriage in the middle class was a mark of respectability. The dominating note of middle class life is getting ahead, which means not just surviving, but improving your position compared to where you started. This means having the proper connections as well as a stable pattern of sex and family life, basically doing the opposite of what the larger lower class did. The traditional bulwarks of organized middle class life, the conservers of the traditions, have been the church and the lodge. The latter has within the last 20 years lost most of its influence, but the church is still a rather important element of middle-class social organization. Why? Because it offered opportunities for networking. If you were trying to move up, then your chances increased by being part of one of their churches. And on top of that, it acted as a symbol for status in that community. Attending the right church signaled to everyone that you were respectable. Recreational clubs of all types, athletic, riding, musical, card playing, and dancing, exist in Bronzeville, as well as the more serious civic organizations. Many people organize their spare time around one or several centers of orientation. These numerous organizations express the middle-class standards of disciplined and ordered behavior as contrasted with the general disorganization at the lower class level. See that? It was a breakaway from the lower class way of life. And what we have to understand is that the lower class Negro was the default, or the authentic Negro coming out of slavery. It's essentially what Negroes were forced to become due to Europeans and white Americans forcing them in that condition for so many centuries. What middle-class blacks were doing was distancing themselves away from that, or at least a lot of it, and a lot of the ways of thinking and the practices. And this is important to understand when we are taking an eagle's view at the larger picture and seeing what is supposed to happen. Middle-class individuals are great joiners and belongers, and these organizations assume a special importance in a community where family background is not too important. They are the organs by which aggressive individuals rise in the world and confirm their status. They also provide numerous positions of leadership for the ambitious and serve as an outlet for talent. Though there is a church-centered middle-class group, the church seems to be giving way in importance to the more secular organizations. At the lower class level, the church is almost the only element of stable, organized life. But this is not true of the middle class. The church for lower class Negroes provided one of the few outlets to experience organized life. But this was not so for middle class Negroes. When a highly respected and popular businessman can answer,
Hell no,
to the question, do you belong to a church? It is obvious that church membership is not a crucial or decisive middle class trait. It's almost crazy to hear any Negro back in this time period responding like this. But apparently they existed. There is, in fact, a large secular-minded group within Bronzeville's middle class which believes that
Negroes have too much religion,
and that
preachers aren't doing the race any good.
too much religion means they overdid it. There's a time when enough is enough and a break is needed. Negroes beating drums and singing in the choir on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and 3 times on Sunday is just too much. Especially when the activity is taking up so much time and not solving any real-world problems. That's the basis of his frustration. There are many more, however, like the proprietor of a small business who said,
I pay my dues at church wherever I go, but I don't believe in neglecting my wife, home, and children's needs in order to make an impression at church. I'm buying a home, and I believe that a man should pay his honest debts first before doing so much on the outside.
That's fair. Occasionally, a person turns up like the postal clerk who doesn't go to church because he thinks he's unworthy.
I belong to the Methodist Church, but I don't go. I believe that church people ought to be above board. I don't think that I ought to be active in the church until I change my way of living.
There are still others like the college-bred redcap who is a trustee of a Baptist church and who believes that
Christianity at its best is indispensable to the full flowering of human personality.
it is not necessary to be a church member to maintain middle-class status and to have friendly and close relations with the church-centered middle-class people. But if a person does belong to a church, it must be the right kind. And we'll find out more about the right kind of church for middle-class Negroes in the next commentary. So I thank you for your time and attention. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.